Welcome to Will of Fire Stories. The Shinobi world was never meant to hold all its demons in one soul. But what if Naruto Uzumaki became more than a jinchūriki? What if every tailed beast chose him, not as a cage, but as a king? Bound by destiny, stabilized by queens, feared by nations. This is the story of a boy who carried all hatred and ruled fate itself. Chapter 1. The Fox in the Ashes. The sky over the hidden leaf wasn't blue anymore. It was the color of a fresh bruise, swollen, purple, and leaking a toxic, golden light that didn't belong to the sun. The air tasted like ozone and scorched iron, the kind of smell that clings to the back of your throat and tells you that the world you knew just died. In the center of the crater where the Hokage rock used to stand, Naruto Uzumaki wasn't breathing, he was vibrating. He sat cross-legged on a jagged pillar of obsidian, his orange jumpsuit shredded into a makeshift loincloth and bandages. But it wasn't the clothes that mattered. It was the skin. His flesh was a canvas of shifting ink, 9 distinct sealing formulas swirling around his navel like a galaxy of black holes. Inside his mind, the cage was gone. There were no bars. There was only a throne room of infinite shadows where 9 pairs of eyes, ranging from slit pupil crimson to ripple-patterned purple, stared down at him. Your trip in, if you think they're gonna just let you walk away with this, kid, Kurama's voice boomed, deeper than a tectonic plate shifting. The fox wasn't behind a gate anymore. He was curled around Naruto's psyche, his fur feeling like warm velvet and static electricity. They don't see a hero. They see a god they can't control. And humans hate what they can't put a leash on. Naruto let a slow, jagged breath out of his lungs. He didn't open his eyes, but he could feel the chakra signatures of the allied shinobi forces hovering at the edge of the crater. Thousands of them, trembling, aiming, kunai with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Let him look, Naruto muttered, his voice raspy, carrying a weight that sounded like he'd aged a century in a single afternoon. I spent 16 years begging for a seat at their table. I played the clown. I bled for their will of fire, until I was dry. And what did it get me? Jiraiya's dead, Neji's cold, my village is a hole in the dirt. He stood up. The movement was fluid, predatory. As his feet touched the stone, the ground beneath him cracked, unable to handle the sheer density of the chakra packed into his marrow. He wasn't just a jinchūriki anymore. He was the Jubi's heartbeat in a human ribcage. Yo, Naruto, a voice barked from the rim of the crater. It was Kiba. The dog user looked like hell, blood matted in Akamaru's fur, his face pale. Behind him stood the remnants of the Konoha 11. Sakura was there, her emerald eyes brimming with a terrifying mix of relief and pure, unadulterated horror. She could see it. With her medical training, she could see that Naruto's circulatory system wasn't pumping blood anymore, it was pumping pure, liquefied energy. We won, man, Kiba yelled, his voice cracking. Madara's gone. The war's over. Come down so the medics can look at you. You look a little messed up, bro. Naruto finally opened his eyes. The allied shinobi forces flinched as one. His eyes weren't blue. They weren't even the toad gold of Sage Mode. They were a terrifying, swirling kaleidoscope, the Rinne Sharingan's ripples overlaid with the vertical slit of the fox and the horizontal bar of the ox. Messed up, Naruto's voice didn't just come from his mouth, it echoed through their skulls. The war isn't over, Kiba. The war just changed management. Naruto, stop. Sakura stepped forward, her voice trembling. You're exhausted. You're talking crazy. Let us help you. We're your friends. Friends? Naruto let out a dry, hacking laugh that sent a shiver down the spine of every ninja present. Friends watch each other's backs, Sakura. They don't wait until one guy does all the heavy lifting and then show up to tell him how to feel. I died back there. When the Gedo Mazo ripped Kurama out of me, I saw the other side. And you know what was there? Nothing. Just a cold, dark room where the will of fire doesn't mean a damn thing. He raised a hand, palm toward the sky. The air groaned. I'm done playing the weapon, Naruto said, his tone dropping into something cold and final. I'm done being the deterrent that keeps your borders safe while you bureaucrats argue about who gets the most land. From here on out, fate doesn't belong to the 5 cage. It belongs to me. He's lost it, a Raikage scout whispered from the shadows. Take him down before he recharges. The command didn't come from a leader, but panic is infectious. A rain of paper bombs and lightning-infused Senbon descended upon the center of the crater. Naruto didn't even blink. Shinra Tensei. The world didn't just push back, it shrieked. A transparent dome of absolute force expanded from Naruto's skin, obliterating the projectiles and sending the first 3 rows of shinobi flying backward like ragdolls. The shockwave leveled what was left of the surrounding buildings, reducing the debris to fine white powder. When the dust settled, Naruto was hovering 6 inches off the ground. 6 Truth Seeker orbs hummed behind his back, pulsating with a rhythmic heartbeat-like glow. Mistake number 1, Matabi, the 2 tails, purred inside his head, her blue flames licking at the edges of his consciousness. Show them why we chose you, little kit. Show them that the cage didn't just hold us in, it kept the world safe from you. Naruto felt the power of the 9 tails surge, tempered by the water of Isobu and the lava of Son Goku. It was a symphony of destruction, and for the first time in his life, he was the conductor. He looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the wasteland. He could feel her coming. Hinata. She was running toward him, her Byakugan active, tears streaming down her face. She was the only one who didn't look at him with fear. She looked at him with a desperate, soul-crushing longing. Naruto-kun, she screamed, her voice lost in the wind. He looked at her, and for a split second, the blue returned to his eyes. But then he remembered the sight of her being pinned to the dirt by pain. He remembered the feeling of her blood on his hands. He remembered that in a world of shinobi, love was just a liability that the powerful used to break the brave. No more, Naruto whispered to the wind. I'm fixing this world, even if I have to burn it down to find the foundation. He didn't fly away, he didn't run, he simply vanished in a flash of yellow. Lightning so bright it blinded everyone in the crater. When the light faded, the hero of the leaf was gone. In his place was a vacuum of power that the world wasn't ready to fill. The age of the shinobi was over. The age of the vessel had begun. Deep in the woods of the land of fire, in a shrine so old the name had been forgotten by time, Naruto reappeared. He didn't stumble, he stood tall, his presence causing the local wildlife to fall silent in a primal display of submission. He walked toward a stone altar where a woman sat waiting. She was beautiful, with hair like spun silver and eyes that held the secrets of the moon. You're late, she said, her voice like silk over glass. Naruto didn't bow, he didn't smile, he just walked up to her and held out his hand, the marks of the tailed beasts glowing with an eerie sovereign light. I had to say goodbye to a boy named Naruto, he said, his slang slipping into a hard, street-toughened edge. He was a loser anyway. Too much heart, not enough spine. Now we get to work. Quote, the woman, Konan, the last remnant of the rain, looked at his hand and then at his eyes. She saw the god-tier power, the raw, unrefined potential of a man who had finally decided that being a hero was a sucker's game. The world will hate you for this, she warned, even as she reached out to take his hand. Naruto pulled her close, his grip firm, his gaze fixed on the stars. Let 'em hate, he growled, as long as they obey. The first seal on the map of the new world was broken. Naruto Uzumaki hadn't just claimed the tailed beasts, he had claimed the throne of reality itself. And he wasn't planning on sitting on it alone. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Cold Iron Crown. The Omegakure rain didn't fall in drops, it fell in sheets of liquid lead, washin' the copper tang of old blood into the great choked gutters of the city. High above the industrial sprawl, atop the highest spire of the Tower of Pain, Naruto stood motionless. He wasn't wearing the orange of a shinobi anymore. He was draped in a high-collared, sleeveless trench coat the color of a dying star, deep charcoal with a lining that shimmered like molten gold. His bare arms were corded with lean muscle, mapped out by the shifting black tattoos of the 9 seals. They throbbed in sync with the city's lightning. He wasn't just feeling the weather, he was the weather. With the combined sensory prowess of the Sage of 6 Paths and the raw environmental empathy of the tailed beasts, he could feel every heart beating in the towers below. He could feel their fear, their hunger, and the tiny, flickering sparks of hope that he was about to extinguish or refine. You look like you're carrying the weight of the whole damn crust on your shoulders, kid, a voice rasped from the shadows of the doorway. Naruto didn't turn, he didn't have to. The vibration of the air told him exactly who it was. The world's heavy, Kurama. Especially when you're the only one holding it up so it doesn't see. Rush the people who don't know any better. Inside his mindscape, which had transformed from a sewer into a sprawling, celestial palace of black marble and white fire, the 9 tails shifted. Heavy as the head, right? That's what the humans say. But you ain't just a king. You're the cage and the key. Don't forget that. A soft footfall echoed on the metal grating. Konan approached, her blue hair plastered to her forehead by the storm. She looked at Naruto's back, at the jagged scars and the truth-seeker orbs that circled him like silent, predatory moons. The emissaries from the cloud and the stone are at the border, she said. Her voice steady despite the oppressive pressure radiating from him. They didn't come to negotiate, Naruto. They brought the head of their assassination squads. Why think you're vulnerable while you're stabilizing the Union? Naruto let out a breath that turned into a small cloud of steam. Vulnerable. That's funny. They think because I'm not screaming, believe it, every 5 seconds, I've gone soft. Quote. He turned around, and the sheer intensity of his gaze made Konan take a half step back. His eyes were a terrifying violet gold, the Rinnegan's ripples pulsing with the orange slit of the fox. Let them in, Naruto said. In fact, clear the path. I want them to see exactly what happens when you try to kill a hurricane with a toothpick. The peace talks were held in the central plaza, a massive arena of steel and glass surrounded by the jagged teeth of Omegacore skyscrapers. The hidden cloud had sent their best, the elite Ginkaku remnants in a dozen jonin. The stone had sent their explosion core. They stood in the rain, weapons drawn, looking up at the lone figure sitting on a throne made of fused kunai and rebar. Uzumaki. The cloud leader shouted, his voice amplified by lightning chakra. By the decree of the Raikage, you are ordered to surrender the tailed beasts. You are an illegal vessel. You are a threat to the balance of the 5 nations. Naruto leaned his cheek on his fist, looking bored. Balance? You mean the balance where you guys hoard power and I sit in a cell until you need a nuke? Nah, I'm over that. The balance just shifted. I'm the center of gravity now. Kill him. The order was a death sentence, for the men who gave it. The stone ninja lunged first, their hands glowing with explosive clay. But they never reached him. Naruto didn't even stand up. He simply tapped a finger on the arm of his throne. Gokenjiki. Great Grand Fireball. It wasn't a jutsu, it was an atmospheric collapse. A wall of blue-white flame, fueled by Matabi's spite, erupted from the air itself. It didn't just burn the attackers, it vaporized the rain, the stone, and the oxygen in their lungs before they could scream. In the blink of an eye, 30 elite ninja were reduced to piles of gray ash that the wind immediately scattered. The remaining assassins froze. The bravado vanished, replaced by a primal, lizard brain realization. They weren't fighting a man. They were fighting a force of nature that had a face. My turn, Naruto whispered. He appeared in the center of their formation in a blur of yellow flash speed. But he wasn't using a kunai. He caught the cloud leader by the throat. The man's neck felt like a dry twig in Naruto's grip. You guys keep talking about villages and nations, Naruto said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. But those are just lines in the dirt. I'm looking at the whole map. And on my map, there aren't any borders. Just people who survive and people who don't. Which one are you? The man clawed at Naruto's hand, his eyes bulging. You're a monster. I'm the monster you made, Naruto replied. You treated me like a weapon for 16 years. Don't act surprised now that the weapon's got a mind of its own. He didn't crush the man's throat. He did something worse. He reached into the man's soul using the human path of the Rinnegan, ripping out every memory, every secret, and every ounce of chakra in a single violent pull. The body dropped like an empty suit of clothes. Naruto turned to the survivors, his presence expanding until it felt like the sky was falling. Go back to your cages. Tell them the tax for my protection just went up. Tell them if they send another blade my way, I won't just kill the messengers. I'll pull their entire hidden village into the sea. As the survivors scrambled away, tripping over their own feet in their haste to escape the graveyard they'd just entered, Naruto felt a soft hand on his shoulder. Hinata stood there. She had followed him from the leaf, abandoning her clan, her father, and her destiny. Her eyes were wide, but they weren't filled with the horror Sakura had shown. They were filled with a fierce, protective devotion. You're shaking, she whispered, her fingers tracing the seals on his arm. It's a lot of power, Hinata, Naruto admitted, his voice finally cracking for a second. Every time I use it, I can hear them. All 9 of them. They want to run wild. They want to punish the world for every cage they ever sat in. It's hard to tell where I end and they begin. Hinata stepped around him, pressing her forehead against his chest. Then let me be your anchor. If you're going to be the god of this world, you need someone to remind you why the world is worth saving. Naruto looked down at her. He felt the fox growl in approval, a deep, rumbling sound of predatory satisfaction. He reached out, cupping her face. "I'm not saving it, Hinata," he said, his eyes turning back to that cold, regal violet. "I'm ruling it. There's a difference." "I know," she replied, a dark, beautiful smile touching her lips. "And I'll be the one holding the crown." In the distance, the sun tried to break through the clouds. But the reign of a Megakure was relentless. Naruto looked out over his new kingdom, the power of the Jubi humming in his veins like a dark, intoxicating wine. He was no longer the boy who wanted to be Hokage. He was the man who had realized that a title was just a name, but power was the only truth. "Konan," Naruto called out without looking back. "Yes, my lord, prepare the seals. We're going to the land of iron." It's time the samurai learned that their neutrality just expired. He walked to the edge of the spire, looking down at the flickering lights of the city. He was the fox, the dragon, and the king. And the world was finally starting to burn the way he needed it to. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Iron Feast. The land of iron was a graveyard of white. Snow didn't just fall here, it suffocated. It was a jagged, frozen wasteland where the wind howled like a wounded beast, and the only thing colder than the air was the steel of the samurai. For centuries, this place had been the neutral ground. The holy sanctuary where the 5 nations put down their blades to talk. Naruto Uzumaki didn't come to talk. He walked through the blizzard wearing nothing but his charcoal trench coat. The fabric snapping in the gale. He didn't leave footprints. The sheer density of the chakra radiating from his feet sublimated the snow into steam before his soles could even touch the ground. Behind him, walking in the wake of his heat, were Hinata and Konan. Hinata's Byakugan was flared, the veins around her eyes bulging, pulsing with a new, dark violet hue, a gift from Naruto's own well of 6 paths energy. "They've mobilized the entire citadel," Hinata reported, her voice cutting through the wind like a razor. "Mifune has 3,000 samurai in full plate armor waiting at the main gate. They've lined the walls with chakra cannons. They're scared, Naruto-kun. They can feel you coming." Naruto didn't slow down. "Fear is a good teacher, Hinata. It's the only thing that keeps people from making the same mistakes twice. And if they don't learn?" Konan asked, her hands hidden in her sleeves, her paper wings already beginning to flake off her back in anticipation. Naruto's eyes flashed, a sudden, violent burst of crimson, then they become part of the landscape. As they reached the massive, iron-studded gates of the citadel, a horn blasted. It was a low, mournful sound that echoed off the mountain peaks. From the battlements, Mifune, the general of the samurai, looked down. He was an old wolf, his face a map of scars and discipline. He didn't look like a man ready to surrender. "Uzumaki." Mifune's voice was ironclad. "This is neutral ground. By the ancient laws of the cage, you have no authority here. Turn back, or the land of iron becomes your tomb." Naruto stopped 50 paces from the gate. He looked up, his expression one of pure, detached boredom. "The ancient laws died with the men who wrote them, Mifune. I'm the one writing the new ones. In Rule New, MBER 1 is, don't tell me where I can't walk. Archers, fire." A black cloud of arrows, each tipped with chakra-conductive steel designed to pierce even the toughest Susanoo, rained down. It was enough ordnance to level a small village. Naruto didn't move, he didn't even raise a hand. Cho Shinra Tensai. The air didn't just ripple, it fractured. An invisible wall of absolute repulsion exploded outward. The arrows didn't just bounce off, they were pulverized into metallic dust. The shockwave hit the gates of the citadel like a physical fist. The 3-foot-thick iron doors groaned, buckled, and then tore off their hinges. Flying backward into the courtyard and crushing dozens of samurai in a symphony of screaming metal. Naruto walked through the wreckage. The courtyard was a sea of steel. Samurai surged forward, their katanas glowing with concentrated chakra. They were fast, faster than any average shinobi, but to Naruto, they were moving through molasses. "Son Goku," Naruto whispered. Deep within him, the 4 tails roared. Naruto's skin didn't change, but his veins began to glow like cooling magma. He slammed a palm into the stone floor. "Yuden. Shikudogen." The ground turned into a literal lake of molten rock in a heartbeat. Samurai screamed as their heavy plate armor became their own personal ovens. The heat was so intense it turned the falling snow into a blinding fog of scalding steam. Naruto moved through the mist like a ghost, his hands blurring. He wasn't using a blade, he didn't need one. He was striking with the precision of a surgeon and the force of a wrecking ball. Popping armor plates with flickers of his fingers and sending warriors flying like discarded toys. Mifune descended from the balcony, his blade, Kurosawa, drawn. He moved with a speed that defied his age, a silver streak in the red glow of the lava. Clang! The sound of the collision rang out like a bell. Mifune's blade hadn't hit Naruto's throat, it had been caught between two of Naruto's fingers. "You're fast, old man," Naruto said, his eyes locking onto Mifune's. "But you're still fighting like a human. That's your first mistake." Naruto twisted his wrist. The legendary blade, famous for its durability, snapped like a dry twig. Mifune's eyes widened, the first crack in his stoic mask. Before he could retreat, Naruto's hand was on his chest. "I don't want your land, Mifune," Naruto growled, his voice vibrating with the collective weight of the 9 beasts. "I want your steel. I want your loyalty. I'm building a world where there are no more wars because there's no one left to fight back. You can be the shield that protects that peace, or you can be the dirt I walk on to get there." Mifune looked around his courtyard. His men were broken, the lava was cooling into jagged glass. And the boy he once thought of as a hero was looking at him with the cold, calculating eyes of a god. "A world without war is a world without honor," Mifune spat, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. "Honor is a luxury for people who aren't starving or watching their kids die in a ditch," Naruto countered. "I'm giving them stability. I'm giving them a god who actually answers prayers. Choose. Right now." Mifune looked at the broken remains of his sword. He looked at Hinata, who was standing over a squad of fallen samurai, her palms glowing with a terrifying, soul-snuffing energy. He saw the future, and it was a golden cage. "The samurai will serve," Mifune whispered, dropping to one knee. Naruto let go of his collar. The pressure in the air instantly vanished, replaced by a haunting silence. He turned his back on the general, looking toward the great hall of the citadel. "Good," Naruto said, "gather the blacksmiths. We're going to need more than just swords. We're going to forge a throne." He walked toward the hall, Hinata and Konan flanking him. As he stepped over the threshold, the 6 paths markings on his back flared. He could feel the other nations reacting. The Raikage was fuming, the Tsuchikage was hiding in his bunkers, the Mizukage was weeping. And the leaf was mobilizing. "Let them come," Naruto murmured to the shadows. "I've got a seat waiting for all of them." He sat down in the center of the hall, the truth seeker orbs forming a ring around him. He closed his eyes, his consciousness expanding, reaching out to the ends of the earth. He could feel every drop of water, every gust of wind, every flicker of fire. He was the world, and the world was him. And for the first time in his life, Naruto Uzumaki wasn't lonely. He was simply alone at the top. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Tides of Reckoning. The Land of Iron was only the beginning. As the frost of the north was bent to Naruto's will, the smell of salt and ozone began to drift upward from the south. The Hidden Mist, Kurigakure, was a village built on blood and fog, a place that understood the price of power better than most. But they didn't understand Naruto. Not yet. Naruto stood on the deck of a massive ironclad warship, a relic of the samurai's hidden naval might, now repurposed as his floating command center. The ship didn't use sails or steam. It moved because Naruto's chakra, channeled through the hull via the Three Tails essence, commanded the ocean itself to carry them. The water beneath the ship didn't ripple, it parted in a perfect, glass-smooth wake that stretched back for miles. Beside him stood Mei Terumi, the Mizukage. She wasn't standing there as an ally. She was bound in chains made of solidified truth-seeker energy, her lava release suppressed by seal Naruto had burned into her collarbone with a single touch. "You're a tyrant, Naruto," Mei spat, her hair matted with sea spray. "You talk about peace, but you're just another conqueror. You're no different from Madara. You're just younger and better at lying to yourself." Naruto didn't look at her. He was staring at the horizon where the mist was thickest. Madara wanted a dream, Mei. He wanted to put everyone to sleep because he couldn't handle the reality of human nature. "I'm doing the opposite. I'm waking everyone up. I'm showing them that the cycle of hatred only exists because there are too many hands on the steering wheel. And you think you're the only one who can drive. I'm the only one who can't be pushed off the road," Naruto replied, his voice a low vibration that said to make the very deck of the ship hum. He raised his hand, and the mist ahead began to swirl. "Isobu," Naruto whispered. From the depths of the ocean, a massive, spiked shell broke the surface. He three tails let out a roar that displaced trillions of gallons of water, creating a tidal wave that raced toward the hidden mist's coastal defenses. The mist shinobi on the shore panicked, firing off water-style, water dragon jutsu. But the three tails didn't even notice. It was a god among insects. Naruto stepped off the edge of the ship. He didn't fall. He walked on the air, each step creating a ripple of golden light beneath his feet. Hinata, take the left flank, Naruto commanded over his shoulder. Konan, the right. If they drop their weapons, they live. If they so much as weave a sign, erase them. With pleasure. Naruto-kun, Hinata's voice drifted up, cold and melodic. She descended from the ship like a vengeful spirit, her twin lion fists glowing with a dark, necrotic purple. The battle for the mist wasn't a war. It was an execution. Naruto landed in the center of the village plaza, his presence hitting the ground like a meteor. The shockwave shattered every window in a 3-block radius. A squad of hunter nin, the elite, surrounded him instantly. They were famous for their silence, their efficiency in killing. They moved in unison, a blur of needles and blades. Naruto didn't use his hands. He let the six tails power leak out. A thick, corrosive alkaline mist erupted from his pores. It wasn't just poison, it was a solvent. The hunter nin's blades dissolved before they could touch his skin. Their masks melted. Their screams were cut short as the very air they breathed turned into acid. Too slow, Naruto murmured. He reached out, his hand moving like a lightning strike, catching the lead hunter nin by the face. With a thought, he flooded the man's system with the Seiken's caustic chakra. The man didn't just die, he liquefied, his remains soaking into the cobblestones. The remaining mist ninja fell back in terror. They had fought monsters before. They had lived through the bloody mist era. But this was different. This was a man who walked through their most lethal attacks as if they were a light summer rain. Suddenly, a massive shark made of water erupted from the ground beneath Naruto. It was Kisame Hoshigaki's legacy, the great shark bullet. Naruto didn't dodge. He caught the massive construct with his bare hands, the water churning violently against his grip. With a guttural roar, he didn't just dissipate the jutsu, he absorbed it. The water was sucked into his palms, fueling the Kokuo's boil release. Futon. Kairiki Musou. Naruto's body hissed as steam exploded from his joints. He moved so fast the sound barrier didn't just break, it shattered. He appeared in front of the Mist's head strategist, a man named Chojuro holding the Haramakare. Chojuro swung the twin swords, but Naruto caught the blade on his forearm. The metal screamed, bending under the pressure of Naruto's reinforced skin. "You're the last of the swordsmen, aren't you?" Naruto asked, his eyes burning with a cruel, mocking light. "It's a shame. I was hoping for a challenge." He kicked Chojuro in the chest. The strategist was sent through 3 stone buildings, his ribs snapping like dry kindling. Naruto didn't follow. He stood in the center of the wreckage, his coat billowing. The Truth Seeker orb slowly rotating behind him. "Listen to me, Kurigakure." Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by the vibration of the two tails' roar. "Your cage is in my custody. You're a leader in the dirt. You have 2 choices. You can keep fighting for a village that has done nothing but send you to die for scraps of land, or you can join the new order. Under me, there are no more bloodline crusades. There is only the law of the vessel." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of burning buildings and the distant sound of Hinata's palms hitting flesh. One by one, the Mist Ninja dropped their swords. The bloody mist had finally met something bloodier than itself. Naruto felt a surge of triumph, but it was hollow. Deep in the recesses of his mind, the tailed beasts were arguing. "You're getting a taste for it, aren't you?" Shukaku cackled, his sandy voice grating against Naruto's skull. "The way they look at you. Like you're the sun and they're just dirt. It feels good to be the one holding the leash for once, doesn't it?" "Shut up, Tanuki," Naruto thought back, though he couldn't deny the heat in his chest. "I'm doing what has to be done. Is that what we're calling it now?" Chome, the 7 tails, buzzed. "Evolution requires a bit of carnage, I suppose. But don't forget, Naruto, a king without a kingdom is just a man in a fancy coat. You need to build something that lasts, or this is all just a very loud tantrum." Naruto ignored them. He walked toward the Mizukage's estate, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic. He found Hinata waiting for him at the entrance, her hands covered in blood that wasn't hers. She looked at him with a feverish intensity, her Byakugan still active. "The village is ours, Naruto-kun," she said. her voice breathy with adrenaline. What now? Naruto looked up at the moon, which was just starting to peek through the dispersing mist. It looked cold. It looked lonely. Now, we send a message to the leaf, Naruto said. Tell Kakashi that I'm coming home. And tell him to make sure the graves are dug. I don't want to waste time doing it myself when I get there. He walked into the estate, the darkness swallowing him whole. He was the fox, the master of the tides, and the emperor of the ash. And the world was finally starting to realize that the boy who wanted to be Hokage had died a long time ago. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Graveyard of Heroes. The border of the Land of Fire didn't welcome Naruto back with the rustle of leaves or the scent of home. It greeted him with a wall of silence. The great forest, usually teeming with life, was deathly still. Even the birds had the instinct to flee before the pressure wave of Naruto's approach hit the canopy. He walked down the center of the main trade route, not as a returning sun, but as a tectonic plate shifting toward a fault line. To his left, Hinata moved with a predatory grace, her Hyuga robes replaced by a sleek, M.I.D. night blue combat mesh that shimmered with the chakra of the Tensegan Shi was slowly manifesting. To his right, Konan floated inches above the dirt, her paper wings shedding obsidian-colored shards that hummed with explosive seals. They've set up the first perimeter at the Kikyo Pass, Hinata said, her Byakugan piercing through miles of dense timber. It's not just the leaf, Naruto-kun. The remnants of the sand are there too. Gaara is leading the vanguard. Naruto's pace didn't falter. Gaara, he was always the one who understood the loneliness the best. It's a shame he still thinks the old way can be saved. He's trying to protect a world that's already been buried. As they rounded the bend into the pass, the horizon was blocked by a literal mountain of sand. Standing atop the crest was Gaara, the case. His face was stoic, but his eyes were rimmed with a deep, existential weariness. Behind him, hundreds of sand and leaf shinobi stood in formation, the last line of defense for the old era. Naruto. Gaara's voice echoed through the canyon, amplified by the desert winds. He commanded. Stop this. I know the pain they put you through. I know the weight of the beasts. But this path ends in nothing but ash. You're becoming the very thing we fought to stop. Naruto stopped, tilting his head back to look at his former friend. The thing we fought to stop was a lie, Gaara. Madara wanted a dream. I want the truth. And the truth is that as long as there are 5 nations, there will be 5 reasons to kill. I'm reducing that number to 1. Then you leave me no choice, Gaara whispered. The desert erupted. A massive wave of sand, miles wide and hundreds of feet high, crashed down toward the path. It was a burial at sea, but with the weight of the earth. Naruto didn't weave a sign. He took a single step forward and let the chakra of the One Tails, Shukaku, surge into his right arm. You're using my own power against my brother. Shukaku's voice cackled in Naruto's mind. Poetic. Let's show him who the real Desert King is. Suna no Shinku, sand vacuum. Naruto didn't push the sand away, he commanded it to stop. The massive wave froze in midair, defying gravity, EV. A grain of sand vibrating under Naruto's superior frequency. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto inverted the pressure. The wave exploded outward, sand blasting the canyon walls and stripping the trees to splinters. In the chaos, Naruto was gone. He appeared atop the sand crest, inches from Gaara. The cage's automatic sand shield hissed, a wall of grit rising to block the blow. Naruto didn't punch, he simply placed his hand against the shield. Amaterasu. Black flames, fueled by the borrowed power of the Uchiha lineage within his 6 paths reach, ignited on the sand. The heat was so intense it didn't just burn. It turned Gaara's ultimate defense into brittle, black glass. The sand can't protect you from the sun, Gaara, Naruto said, his eyes a terrifying swirl of Rinnegan ripples and beastly slits. Gaara swung his gold dust sand, trying to bind Naruto's legs, but Naruto moved like a blur of yellow light. He caught Gaara by the throat, the weight of the 2, 3, and 4 tails in. Choring him to the spot so firmly that even the earth's shifting couldn't move him. You're a good man, Gaara, Naruto muttered, his voice dropping to a low, mournful tone. That's why you're going to be the first one to see what the new world looks like. You won't have to carry the burden of a village anymore. I'm taking it from you. Naruto didn't kill him. He slammed a palm into Gaara's seal, flooding the cage's system with a paralyzing, white-hot chakra that short-circuited his nervous system. Gaara collapsed, his sand falling limp around him like spilled salt. Secure him, Naruto commanded. Hinata stepped forward, her fingers glowing with gentle fist points that now carried the sting of the six tails acid. She tapped 3 points on Gaara's spine, ensuring he wouldn't move for days. The allied shinobi at the base of the pass watched in horror as their strongest leader was taken down in less than a minute. The morale didn't just break, it evaporated. "Who's next?" Naruto shouted, his voice booming like thunder over the pass. From the shadows of the trees, a figure stepped out. He wasn't wearing a cage hat, but he carried the weight of the leaf on his shoulders. Kakashi Hatake, the sixth Hokage, looked at his former student with a heart that was visibly breaking. "Naruto," Kakashi said, his voice steady despite the carnage. "I failed you as a teacher. I let the village treat you like a tool, and for that, I'll never forgive myself. But as Hokage, I can't let you walk into that village with blood on your hands." Naruto looked at the man who had taught him the value of teamwork. The man who had stood by him through the darkest days. For a second, a flicker of the old Naruto, the boy who loved ramen and dreamed of a hat, showed in the twitch of his lip. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold, iron resolve of the vessel. "Teamwork is for those who aren't strong enough to stand alone, Sensei," Naruto said, the truth seeker orbs forming a jagged halo behind him. "You didn't fail me, you just taught me a lesson you didn't mean to. That in the end, the only person who can save you is the one in the mirror." Kakashi lifted his headband, revealing a Sharingan that was already spinning into the Mangekyo. "Then I'll do what I have to do. For the leaf." "The leaf is dead, Kakashi," Naruto growled, his aura expanding until the very air began to glow. "You're just guarding the cemetery." Naruto lunged. The collision between the two didn't sound like a fight, it sounded like the world ending. Lightning clashed with golden fire, and the Kikyo Pass became a crucible of raw, unfiltered power. Naruto wasn't just fighting his teacher, he was burying his past. And with every strike, the boy from the hidden leaf died a little more, making room for the king who would rule the ruins. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Silence of the Will. The Kikyo Pass was no longer a geographical landmark, it was a scar on the face of the earth. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of Kakashi's Chidori, which hissed and sputtered against the overwhelming gravity of Naruto's presence. The sixth Hokage was gasping, his flak jacket shredded, the blood froze. A deep gash on his forehead seeping into his lone eye. Naruto stood 10 paces away, his charcoal coat barely singed. He wasn't even breathing hard. The five tails, Kokuo, was lending him a constant stream of steam-pressurized chakra, keeping his muscles primed and his reaction time at a level that made the Sharingan look like a flickering candle in a hurricane. "You're relying on a ghost's eye, Kakashi," Naruto said, his voice echoing with a haunting, multi-tonal resonance. "Obito gave you that power to protect your friends. But you're using it to protect a system that killed him. Don't you see the irony?" Kakashi didn't respond. He couldn't. He was funneling every ounce of his remaining chakra into his left eye. Kamui. The space around Naruto's head began to warp, a swirling vortex of localized dimension tearing trying to decapitate him. It was a move that had killed gods. Naruto didn't move. He didn't have to. A single truth seeker orb flattened into a disc, positioned perfectly between his neck and the spatial rift. The orb didn't just block the Kamui, it stabilized the space, its black, primordial matter refusing to be moved by the laws of physics. "My turn," Naruto whispered. He was there in a flicker of yellow, not the yellow flash, but something faster, something that felt like the light of a star. He caught Kakashi's wrist, the lightning of the Chidori dying instant L. Why is Naruto's six paths chakra smothered it like a blanket over a spark? With a brutal, clinical efficiency, Naruto drove his knee into Kakashi's sternum. He heard the ribs snap, a sound like dry timber breaking in the dead of winter. Kakashi flew backward, slamming into the jagged remains of a stone pillar. "Sensei!" Sakura's scream tore through the clearing. She came charging from the treeline, her fist cocked back, the ground beneath her feet shattering from the sheer force of her gathered chakra. She was the finest medic, the strongest kunoichi of the new age. She swung with enough power to level a mountain. Naruto caught her fist with his palm. The shockwave blew the hair back from his face, but he didn't move an inch. The ground beneath him didn't even crack, he was absorbing the kinetic energy and venting it through the soles of his feet into the tectonic plates themselves. Sakura's eyes widened. "No. It's not possible. You've spent your whole life trying to catch up to us, Sakura," Naruto said. His voice almost gentle, which made it 10 times more terrifying. But you were chasing the wrong Naruto. You were chasing a boy who wanted your acknowledgement. That boy is gone. He squeezed her fist. Sakura gasped, her bones grinding together. Naruto, please, she sobbed, tears carving tracks through the grime on her face. This isn't you. The Naruto I know would never hurt his comrades. He would never betray the leaf. The leaf betrayed me the day they put a demon in a cradle and told the world to hate the baby, Naruto replied. He didn't hit her. He simply let a LSE of the seven tails chakra, a high-frequency vibration, travel through his arm into hers. Sakura's entire nervous system locked up, her muscles seizing in a forced paralysis. He let her drop to the dirt next to the unconscious Kakashi. Hinata, Naruto called out. The Hyuga princess appeared beside him, her presence cold and sharp as a winter moon. She looked down at Sakura with a chilling lack of empathy. Bind them, Naruto commanded. Put them with Gaara. I want them to see the end. I want them to see the towers fall. As you wish, Naruto-kun, Hinata murmured. She moved with blurring speed, her fingers striking tenketsu points on her former teammate with the grace of a weaver. Naruto turned his gaze toward the horizon. The gates of Konoha were visible now, a mere few miles away. He could feel the panic radiating from the village. It was a buffet of terror, and the tailed beasts within him were salivating. They're preparing the final seal, Seiken, the six tails, bubbled in his mind. I can feel the Uzumaki masks being moved. They're going to try to call the Reaper, Naruto. They're going to try to eat your soul. Naruto let out a dark, guttural chuckle. Let them call him. I've got 9 gods in my gut. What's one more hungry ghost? He began to walk. Every step he took caused a low-frequency tremor that shook the foundations of the leaf's walls. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't sneaking. He was a god king coming to claim his inheritance. As he reached the outskirts, the defensive lines were a joke. Chunin and Jonin fired volleys of fire and water, but the elements simply bent around Naruto as if he were the master of the world, which he was. He didn't even look at them. He just kept walking. Suddenly, the air grew heavy. A massive, spectral figure began to manifest over the Hokage estate. It was translucent, white-haired, with a dagger in its teeth and a prayer bead in its hand. The Shiki Fujin, the Reaper, the elders, Koharu and Homura, stood on the roof, their hands clasped in the forbidden seal. Their lives already forfeit as the price for the summon. Uzumaki Naruto, Homura screamed, his voice thin and desperate. For the safety of the world, we cast you into the belly of the death god. The Reaper reached out with a long, ghostly hand, its fingers extending toward Naruto's chest, aiming for the soul that housed the 9 beasts. Naruto stopped. He looked the Reaper in its hollow, dead eyes. You're in the wrong neighborhood, spirit, Naruto growled. He didn't use a jutsu. He reached into the void of his own power, pulling from the yin-yang release of the Sage of Six Paths. He grabbed the Reaper's spectral hand with his physical one. The elders gasped, blood spraying from their mouths. The Reaper itself let out a silent, soul-piercing shriek as Naruto's chakra, dark, ancient, and absolute, began to flow into it. I don't belong to death, Naruto roared, his eyes glowing with a blinding, celestial white. Death belongs to me. With a violent wrench, Naruto didn't just resist the seal. He shattered it. The Reaper exploded into a billion shards of spiritual energy, which Naruto inhaled in a single, massive breath. The 2 elders collapsed, our bodies turning to ash before they hit the roof. The great gates of Konoha groaned and then burst inward, not from an explosion, but from the sheer atmospheric pressure of Naruto's presence. He walked into the village. The streets were empty, the civilians hiding in the bunkers. He walked past the Ichiraku ramen stand, which was boarded up and silent. He didn't look back. He stopped in the center of the village. The shadow of the Hokage rock, now cracked and crumbling, falling over him. I'm home, Naruto said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hidden village. But I didn't come back to serve. I came back to rule. He raised both hands. The Truth Seeker orbs ascended, forming a massive, black crown over the village. Starting today, Naruto announced, the will of fire is extinguished. There is only the will of the fox. And I am the fox. Beside him, Konan and Hinata took their places, his queens, his enforcers, his witnesses. The leaf had fallen without a single building being knocked down. It had fallen because its soul had been replaced. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Reaping of the Seven Swords. The capital of the Land of Water, Kurigakure, was no longer a village of mist, it was a city of ghosts. The damp, Salty air that once tasted of sea spray and iron now felt like a tomb. Naruto sat upon a throne carved from the jagged remains of the Mizukage's stone desk, his paws. Ture relaxed but his eyes radiating a lethality that made the very shadows in the room retreat. Before him, the legendary 7 swordsmen of the mist, or what was left of them, were kneeling. Their blades, weapons that had carved through armies and shaped the history of the continent, were laid out on the floor like discarded kitchen knives. Chojuro was there, his chest wrapped in bandages, his spirit visibly crushed. Beside him were the new recruits and the reanimated veterans Naruto had plucked from the brink of the afterlife using the outer path of the Rinnegan. "You guys look pathetic," Naruto said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that vibrated in the marrow of their bones. "The bloody mist became a puddle of lukewarm tea while I was away. You forgot what it means to be a weapon. We fought for our home," Chojuro croaked, refusing to look up. "We fought for the dream of a peaceful sea." "A dream is just a lie you tell yourself so you can sleep at night," Naruto countered, standing up. The movement was so fluid it looked like the air itself was shifting to accommodate him. "Peace isn't something you dream about. It's something you impose. It's a wall you build out of the bodies of anyone who disagrees with you. That's the only peace that lasts." He walked over to the Haramakare, the twin-handle sword. He picked it up with one hand. The blade, which usually required a massive amount of chakra to even glow, erupted in a violent, azure flame the moment Naruto's skin touched the hilt. The chakra was so dense it didn't just light up the room, it hummed with the frequency of a dying sun. "This is the problem," Naruto said, looking at the sword. "You think the power is in the steel. You think the strength is in the tradition. But the strength is in the will to use it without hesitation." He tossed the Haramakare back at Chojuro's feet. The sword hit the floor with a heavy thud, the azure flames dying instantly. "I'm going to the land of Earth," Naruto announced. "Onoki is a stubborn old goat. He's spent 80 years thinking he's the smartest guy in the room because he can fly and turn things into dust. I'm going to show him that even the mountain can be humbled." "Naruto-kun," Hinata said, stepping out of the shadows behind the throne. She was draped in a cloak of pure white fur, her Byakugan tracing the chakra networks of the kneeling swordsman with a cold, clinical detachment. "The leaf remnants are moving. Sakura and Kakashi have escaped their bonds. They're heading toward Iwagakure to form a coalition." Naruto didn't look surprised. He didn't even look annoyed. "Good, let them group up. It saves me the trouble of hunting them down one by one. I want them all in the same place. I want the world to watch as the will of fire and the will of stone are crushed under the same heel." The flight to the land of Earth was a display of absolute dominance. Naruto didn't use a bird or a plane. He moved through the sky encased in a golden Susanoo-like shroud of 9 tails energy, with Hinata and Konan flanking him like celestial bodies. Below them, the world looked small. The borders, the rivers, the fortifications, they were all just lines in the dirt. As they crossed the jagged peaks of the stone country, the air grew heavy with the scent of sulfur and dry earth. Iwagakure was a fortress carved into the very bones of the planet. It was a city of stone, built to withstand a siege of 1,000 years. Onoki, the 3rd Tsuchikage, was waiting for him. He hovered in the air, his small, hunched frame radiating a defiance that belied his age. Around him, thousands of stone ninja stood on the plateaus, their hands forming the signs for the earth-style, mountain sandwich jutsu. "Uzumaki," Onoki shouted, his voice cracking but firm. "You've crossed the line. The land of Earth does not bow to monsters. We are the stone that does not break. We are the foundation of the world." Naruto stopped in midair, a mile away from the fortress. He looked at the massive army, the cannons, the barricades. "Foundation." Naruto's laugh was a dark, echoing sound that caused the clouds to scatter. "Onoki, you're not the foundation. You're just the dust that's settled on it. And it's time for a spring cleaning." Naruto closed his eyes. He reached deep into the core of his being, where the 4 tails, Son Goku, and the 5 tails, Kokuo, resided. He felt the heat of the lava and the pressure of the steam. "Let's give them a real earthquake," Son Goku roared in his mind. Naruto didn't use a hand sign. He simply descended. He didn't fly down, he dropped like a meteor. Yuten, Gomu no Kyojin, Vulcan's descent. He hit the central plaza of Iwagakure with the force of a tectonic shift. The impact didn't just create a crater, it sent a ripple of molten rock through the entire city. The stone buildings, the impenetrable walls, the ancient towers, they didn't just fall. They melted. The ground beneath the stone ninja turned into a roiling sea of lava in a heartbeat. Screams filled the air, but they were quickly drowned out by the roar of the earth. Naruto stood in the center of the inferno, the lava swirling around him like a loyal pet. He wasn't burned, he was the fire. Onoki descended, his face pale with rage and horror. You would destroy a whole civilization just to prove a point. I'm not destroying it, Onoki, Naruto said, walking toward him through the flames. I'm refining it, I'm burning away the impurities. The weak, the indecisive, the ones who cling to the past, they're the slag. What's left will be pure. What's left will be mine. Onoki clapped his hands together. Jinten. Genkei Hakuri no Jutsu. A cube of transparent energy expanded between his palms, a technique that could dismantle matter at an atomic level. He launched it at Naruto. A beam of pure annihilation. Naruto didn't dodge, he raised his left hand, the Rinnegan in his palm glowing with a fierce, violet light. Gakido. Preta Path. The particle-style beam hit Naruto's hand and was instantly sucked into his body. He didn't just absorb it, he tasted it. The raw power of the stone was added to his own, a small snack for the God King. Is that it? Naruto asked, his voice dripping with contempt. 80 years of mastery, and that's all you've got? You're fighting with the power of a man. I'm fighting with the power of the world. He appeared in front of Onoki in a flicker of steam-assisted speed. He caught the old man's head in his hand, his fingers digging into the stone-hard skin. You like dust so much, Onoki. Naruto whispered. Become part of it. He didn't kill him instantly. He used the human path to rip out every bit of tactical knowledge, every secret of the particle style, and every ounce of the Tsuchikage's life force. Onoki's eyes rolled back in his head, his body shriveling until he was nothing more than a husk of a man. Naruto tossed the body aside like a piece of trash. He looked around at the burning ruins of Iwagakure. The invincible fortress was a smoking graveyard. From the shadows of a collapsed temple, a group of survivors emerged. Among them were Sakura and Kakashi, their faces covered in soot, their eyes wide with a despair that no words could describe. They had seen the fall of the leaf, and now they had seen the death of the stone. Naruto, Sakura whispered, her voice trembling. What have you become? Naruto turned to look at them. The truth-seeker orbs forming a throne of black glass behind him. He sat down, the lava cooling into obsidian at his feet. I've become the end of your story, Sakura, Naruto said. And the beginning of mine. You can stay and witness the birth of the new empire, or you can die in the ashes of the old one. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. I have a world to run, and I'm losing my patience with the past. Hinata stepped up beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. She looked at Sakura with a cold, triumphant smile. The era of the ninja is over, Hinata announced, her voice carrying over the crackle of the flames. The era of the Uzumaki has begun. Naruto looked up at the darkened sky, the soot from the village blotting out the sun. He felt the tailed beasts within him cheering. A cacophony of divine power. He was the fox, the king, and the god of the ash. And the world was finally quiet. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The heavens wept gold. The land of lightning didn't have the luxury of distance. Perched atop the jagged, cloud-piercing spires of the Kumogakure peaks, the Raikage's village was a fortress of altitude and arrogance. But even at the roof of the world, the air was thinning for them. Naruto didn't arrive with a fleet or a march, he arrived as a celestial anomaly. A golden streak tore through the stratosphere, trailing a wake of ionized air that turned the clouds into a glowing, radioactive orange. Naruto hovered 3,000 feet above the Raikage's office, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't touching the ground, the sheer weight of his chakra was causing the mountain peaks below him to groan and fracture. The truth-seeker orbs had expanded, forming a massive, rotating ring behind him that looked like a black sun. A's down there, pacing like a caged tiger, Chome, the seven tails, buzzed within the cockpit of Naruto's mind. He's got the remaining leaf brats with him. They've pooled their chakra into that big cannon of theirs. They're aiming for the moon, but they'll settle for your heart. Naruto looked down, his Rinnegan piercing through the layers of steel and stone. He could see them. The fourth Raikage stood next to the unconscious body of B, his brother, whose Bijuu had been ripped away by Naruto's reach weeks ago. Next to them stood the remnants. Sasuke Uchiha, his eyes bleeding from the strain of a flickering Susanoo. And the survivors of the stone and mist. It's a gathering of ghosts, Naruto muttered. His slang had grown colder, more detached, the way a butcher looks at a side of beef. They think one big blast is gonna fix the fact that they're obsolete. Below, the Raikage's secret weapon, the chakra cannon, hummed to life. It was a massive spire of blue energy, fed by He collective life force of 1,000 shinobi. It was designed to shatter meteorites. Fire. A's roar echoed through the valley. A beam of pure, white-hot destruction erupted from the mountain. It moved at the speed of light, a pillar of annihilation meant to erase Naruto from the sky. Naruto didn't flinch, he didn't even raise his hands to defend. He simply tapped into the yin-yang release, the primordial spark of the sage. Banbutsu Suzu, creation of all things. The beam didn't hit him. It hit an invisible threshold and began to change. The white light didn't explode, it calcified. Under Naruto's absolute will, the energy was rewritten. The beam of destruction turned into a cascading waterfall of solid, 24-karat gold. Thousands of tons of precious metal rained down on the hidden cloud, crushing their barracks and burying their streets in a literal, suffocating wealth. Naruto descended through the golden rain, landing on the roof of the command center. The gold dust clung to his charcoal coat, making him look like a god of greed and war. A charged forward, his lightning-style armor flickering wildly. He was the fastest man alive, or so the legend said. To Naruto, he was a statue. Naruto caught A's fist. The impact shattered the concrete beneath Naruto's feet, but his arm didn't move an inch. You're vibrating at the wrong frequency, A, Naruto said, his eyes shifting to the crimson of the fox. You're fast for a human. But I'm the speed of thought. He squeezed. The Raikage's lightning armor shattered like cheap glass. A screamed as his hand was reduced to a pulp of bone and sinew. Naruto didn't stop. He drove a fist into A's gut, the power of Kokuo's steam release exploding behind the punch. The Raikage was sent through the floor, through the second floor, and into the basement, leaving a perfect smoking hole through the heart of his palace. Sasuke lunged from the shadows, his Amaterasu-coated blade aiming for Naruto's throat. Naruto. This ends now. Naruto didn't even turn his head. He caught the blade with his bare hand, the black flames licking at his skin but failing to burn the 6 paths, hide. You're still talking about ends, Sasuke? Naruto asked, looking at his former rival with a pity that cut deeper than any blade. I already won. I won the moment I stopped caring about your approval. You're just a stray dog barking at the moon. He snapped the Kusanagi blade with a flick of his wrist and backhanded Sasuke, sending him crashing into the remains of the chakra cannon. Naruto stood in the center of the wreckage, the gold still falling from the sky. He looked at the gathered shinobi, the last of the 5 nations' pride. They were broken, buried in gold, and staring at a man who could turn their very souls into currency. The land of lightning is mine, Naruto announced. The clouds belong to me. The thunder belongs to me. And you. He looked at the survivors. You belong to the dirt. He raised a hand, and the truth-seeker orbs began to glow with a terrifying violet light. Hinata, Konan, he called out. Clean up the scraps. I'm going to the top of the peak. I want to see the sun rise over a world that finally knows who its master is. As he walked away, the screams began again, but Naruto didn't hear them. He only heard the 9 voices in his head, and for the first time, they were all singing the same song. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Pale Moon's Eclipse. The air atop the highest peak of the Land of Lightning was thin enough to kill a normal man, but Naruto breathed it in like it was the finest incense. He stood at the very edge of a jagged precipice, the world spread out beneath him like a discarded map. The golden rain had stopped, leaving Kumogakure a glittering graveyard of frozen wealth and silent screams. Behind him, the space rippled. Konan stepped out of a flurry of paper, her expression unreadable. The Raikage is stabilized in the lower levels. Sasuke Uchiha has been sealed within the moon casket. He's alive, but his eyes, they won't be seeing the sun for a long time. Good, Naruto said, not turning around. Sasuke always loved the dark. I just gave him a version of it he can't escape. And Hinata? Konan asked, her voice dipping. She's evolving, Naruto replied. He finally turned, and even Konan, who had seen the depths of Akatsuki's madness, felt a cold sweat prickle her neck. Naruto's skin was turning a pale, luminescent white, and 2 small, horn-like protrusions were beginning to bud from his hairline. The Tenseigin isn't just a Dushijutsu, Konan. It's a bridge. She's crossing it. Suddenly, the sky didn't just darken, It curdled. The stars, usually sharp in the mountain air, began to bleed into a sick, bruised violet. In the center of the celestial mess, the moon began to pulse. It wasn't the white orb of the night, it was turning an angry, veined red. The seal is weakening, Saiken hissed in Naruto's ear. The rabbit is kicking the lid of her cage. Naruto looked up. Kagaya. She's sensing the union of the nine. She thinks I'm a dinner bell. A beam of white light shot down from the moon, striking the plateau with the force of an orbital strike. When the dust cleared, a woman stood there. She was taller than any human, her skin the color of milk, her hair a river of silver that flowed upward as if gravity were a suggestion. Her third eye, the Rinne Sharingan, pulsed with a rhythm that made Naruto's own heart stutter. My chakra, Kagaya Otsutsuki whispered, her voice sounding like 1,000 people screaming underwater. You have gathered the pieces. You have mended the vessel. Give it back. Naruto didn't bow. He didn't shake. He stepped forward, the truth seeker orbs forming a rotating shield around his body. Your chakra. You've been gone a long time, lady. In this world, finders keepers. And I didn't just find it, I earned it in a gutter while people threw stones at me. You are but a farmhand holding a king's blade, Kagaya said, her eyes narrowing. With a wave of her hand, the environment shifted. In a millisecond, the mountain peak was gone. They were standing on a sea of acid. The fumes were so corrosive that Konan's paper began to yellow instantly. Naruto grabbed her, his chakra forming a protective bubble around them both. Stay back, Konan, Naruto commanded. This isn't a ninja fight. This is a family dispute. Kagaya launched a barrage of all-killing ash bones from her palms. Each one was a death sentence. One touch, and the body would crumble into dust, bypassing any healing factor. Naruto moved. He didn't use the yellow flash. He used the Ameno Tejikara he had ripped from Sasuke's stolen essence. He swapped places with an ash bone, appearing inches from Kagaya's face. Shukaku. Matabi. Now. His fist glowed with a mixture of sand and blue fire. He slammed it into Kagaya's jaw. The impact sent a shockwave through the acid sea, creating a mile-high wall of corrosive liquid. Kagaya flew backward, her face showing the first sign of something she hadn't felt in eons, pain. You, a mere mortal, strike a god. She shrieked. I'm not a mortal, Naruto growled, his voice a chorus of 9 beasts and 1 broken boy. I'm the guy who's gonna put you back in the dirt. He unleashed the super-tailed beast Restraint. 9 spheres, each infused with a different element, lava, ink, acid, blue fire, swirl. D around him before screaming toward the goddess. The explosion didn't just crack the dimension, it tore the fabric of the acid world, revealing the void beneath. Kagaya emerged from the smoke, her robes tattered, her hair wild. She was transforming. Her body began to swell into a rabbit-like monstrosity of white chakra, dozens of tailed beast heads erupting from her skin. She's losing control, Son Goku yelled. Hit her with the yin-yang seal. Naruto closed the distance, his hands glowing with the sun and moon marks. But as he reached out, a figure intercepted him. It was Hinata, but she was different. Her hair was glowing with a ghostly blue flame, and her eyes were empty wells of pure Tensegan starlight. She didn't attack Kagaya, she stood between her and Naruto. Hinata, move, Naruto shouted. No, she said, her voice sounding like crystal breaking. The goddess shouldn't be sealed, Naruto-kun. She should be consumed. Don't waste the power. Take it, take her, make the cycle end with us. Naruto hesitated for a fraction of a second. In that moment, Kagaya's monstrous form lunged. But Hinata didn't flinch. She raised her hands, and a massive palm of silver chakra, the 8tr. I-grams vacuum wall, slammed into the goddess, pinning her against the invisible boundary of the dimension. Do it, Hinata screamed, her veins glowing with a terrifying intensity. Rule the fate of the stars, my king. Naruto didn't need to be told twice. He lunged, not with a seal, but with his mouth open, his chakra teeth baring. He slammed into Kagaya, and the world went white. He wasn't just fighting her. He was absorbing the very source of all chakra. He felt the history of the Otsutsuki, the cold vacuum of space, and the hunger of the divine. When the light faded, the acid world was gone. They were back on the peak in the land of lightning. The moon was white again. Kagaya was gone. Naruto stood in the center of the plateau. His horns were fully formed now, and his eyes were a shifting, iridescent white violet. He looked at his hands, which were crackling with a power that made the tailed beasts feel like house pets. He looked at Hinata, who was kneeling, her Tenseigan fading but her devotion burning brighter than ever. He looked at Conan, who stood in awe of the entity he had become. "The goddess is gone," Naruto said, his voice now a singular, terrifying chord of absolute authority. "The gods are dead, I'm the only one left." He looked toward the horizon. He could feel every soul on the planet. He could feel their heartbeats, their sins, and their potential. "The world is quiet," Naruto whispered. "Let's keep it that way." He walked toward Hinata, lifting her chin with a cold, pale finger. "You did well, my queen. The throne is ready. Now, let's go show the survivors what happens when the moon finally stops crying." End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Architect of Dust. The aftermath of Kaguya's consumption didn't leave Naruto exhausted, it left him hungry. Not for food, but for the very structure of reality to align with his thoughts. He stood in the center of the ruins of the Hidden Leaf, a place he had once called home, now nothing more than a sandbox for his grand design. With a flick of his wrist, the Truth Seeker orbs didn't just move, they multiplied, weaving a lattice of black energy that began to pull the shattered stone of the Hokage rock back together into a new, terrifying shape. "He's rebuilding the village in his own image," Sakura whispered from the iron cage Naruto had manifested in the center of the plaza. She sat beside a broken Kakashi, watching as Naruto hovered above the debris like a silent, pale vulture. "He's not just a king anymore. He's the architect. He's erasing the history," Kakashi rasped, his eyes fixed on the carvings. The faces of the previous Hokage weren't being restored. They were being smoothed over, replaced by a single, monolithic visage, Naruto's own, with the horns of the Otsutsuki and the cold, unblinking eyes of the Rinnegan. Naruto descended, his feet silent on the freshly fused obsidian floor. He looked at his former teacher and teammate through the bars. His presence was so heavy it felt like the air itself was trying to apologize for being in his way. "You guys look at me like I've lost my mind," Naruto said, his slang sharpened into a weapon. "But I've never been clearer. You spent decades Ryan, to prune the branches of a rotten tree. I just decided to pull it up by the roots and plant something that actually grows straight. By killing everyone who disagrees." Sakura spat, her voice racking with a mixture of grief and fury. "Nobody's dying today, Sakura. Not unless they choose to," Naruto replied, his voice a low, melodic hum. "I'm implementing the Kyusu no Mi, the Eye of Consensus. With the tailed beasts and the Otsutsuki core merged inside me, I'm linking the chakra of every living soul to my own. No more secrets, no more lies, no more hidden villages. If you feel hate, I feel it. If you plan a war, I'm in your head before you can even draw a kunai." "You're talking about a hive mind," Kakashi said, horror dawning on his face. "Totalitarianism on a spiritual level." Quote, "I'm talking about a world without funerals," Naruto countered, his eyes flashing a violent violet. "I'm talking about the end of the Shinobi, those who endure. Why endure when you can thrive? Why ed for a border when I've erased the map?" He turned his back on them as Hinata approached. She was a vision of lethal elegance, her Tenseigan radiating a soft, lunar light that seemed to bleach the color out of the world around her. Behind her, Conan led a procession of the world's surviving leaders, Mei, and the representatives of the stone, all of them wearing the same black collars Naruto had forged from his own chakra. "The resonance is complete, Naruto-kun," Hinata said, bowing her head slightly. "The network is live, the people are quiet." "Quiet isn't enough, Hinata. I want them to understand," Naruto said. He raised his hand toward the sky. "Watch." High above the planet, the moon began to shift. It wasn't an eclipse or a phase. Naruto was using the Diva path on a planetary scale. The moon began to glow with a series of massive, glowing runes, the seal of the 9 beasts woven into a web of Otsutsuki script. Infinite Tsukuyomi, refracted. He didn't put them to sleep. He didn't trap them in a dream. Instead, a soft, golden light bathed the entire planet. Across the 5 nations, people looked up. They didn't fall over. Instead, they felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of clarity. The old grudges, the ancestral hates, the petty jealousies, they were muffled, dampened by the sheer weight of Naruto's calm. "I can hear them," Naruto whispered, his eyes rolling back slightly. "Millions of them. They're scared, yeah, but they're not fighting. For the first time in 10,000 years, the world isn't sharpening its teeth." Suddenly, a localized tremor shook the plaza. From a rift in space-time, a new figure emerged. It wasn't a human, but a creature of liquid shadow and jagged white armor, an Otsutsuki scout, or Rashiki, sent to investigate why the harvest had gone silent. So, the creature sneered, spinning a glowing red fishing rod. The monkey ate the gardener. You think you can just sit on this throne and play God, little beast? You're just a snack for the main house. Naruto didn't even look at him. He snapped his fingers. The space around Arashiki didn't just fold, it collapsed. The truth-seeker orbs swarmed the scout like hornets, turning into microscopic needles that shredded his chakra network before he could even swing his rod. Naruto appeared in front of him, catching the scout by the throat. The main house is next on my list, Naruto growled, his voice vibrating with the power of the Jubi. You guys treat worlds like orchards. I'm the one who's gonna burn the orchard and hunt the farmers. He didn't kill the scout. He opened his palm, and the Geto Mazo's chains erupted from his skin, dragging the Otsutsuki into the depths of Naruto's own internal dimension to be processed as raw energy. He turned back to his queens in the kneeling cages. The first threat from the stars has arrived, Naruto announced, his voice booming across the new capital. The world is unified now because it has to be. We aren't fighting for land anymore. We're fighting for the right to exist in a universe that wants to eat us. He walked to the edge of the new Hokage rock, looking out over the sprawling city that was quickly becoming a fortress for the entire human race. He felt the fox laugh inside him, a dark, satisfied sound. The boy who wanted to be Hokage is dead, Kurama rummaged through Naruto's thoughts. Long live the Emperor of the Void. Naruto looked at his hands, which were no longer scarred by training or battle, but smooth and pale as marble. He was the vessel of the gods, the ruler of fate, and the only thing standing between humanity and the dark. Start the draft, Naruto commanded Konan. I don't care if they were bakers or blacksmiths yesterday. Today, they're the vanguard of the Uzumaki Empire. We're going to the stars, and we're bringing the fire with us. He sat on his throne of black glass, Hinata on his right and Konan on his left. The sun set over the land of fire, but for the first time, Naruto wasn't afraid of the dark. The dark belonged to him. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Stellar Forge. The atmosphere of Earth was no longer a ceiling, it was a veil. Naruto stood on a platform of solidified gravity, suspended 50 miles above the stratosphere. Below, the world was wrapped in a shimmering lattice of golden chakra, the great seal of the vessel. Above, the stars didn't twinkle, they stared like cold, predatory eyes. Naruto's physical form had transcended the limits of human biology. His skin was the color of a supernova's core, and his hair drifted in the vacuum like silver smoke. He was holding a sphere of pure, compressed iron the size of a mountain, hovering between his palms. He wasn't just holding it, he was rewriting its atomic structure using the combined mastery of the 4 tails heat and the 6 tails caustic pressure. The core is stabilizing, Naruto-kun, Hinata's voice whispered in his mind. She was miles below him, standing at the apex of the newly constructed Sky Needle in the heart of the Empire. Her Tensegan was linked to his, providing the spatial coordinates necessary for the great work. Keep the rhythm, Hinata, Naruto replied, his voice a subsonic boom that resonated through the vacuum. If the frequency slips even a fraction, the land of fire becomes a crater. He was forging the Amano Iwado, the Heaven's Gate. It wasn't a building, it was a planetary defense array. A weaponized ring of truth-seeker matter designed to intercept the Otsutsuki long before they reached the soil. Inside his mind, the tailed beasts were working like a well-oiled machine. Shukaku was managing the structural density. Matabi provided the high-intensity plasma, Isobu regulated the cooling cycles. They weren't his prisoners anymore, they were his generals, his council of gods. You're pushing it, kid. Kurama's voice rumbled, his 9 tails acting as the primary conduits for the massive energy flow. Even with Kagai's core, you're trying to build a cage for the universe. The stars don't like being told where to look. The stars can complain to me in person, Naruto growled. Suddenly, a ripple tore through the fabric of space-time. 3 massive, crystalline monolith-s, Otsutsuki ships, dropped out of the void. They were jagged, bone-white, and radiating a hunger that felt like a physical chill. From the lead ship, a figure descended. He was massive, draped in heavy, ornate robes that looked like they were woven from the fabric of dead galaxies. Momoshiki Otsutsuki looked at Naruto with a boredom that was more insulting than any threat. The fox child has been busy, Momoshiki said, his voice echoing through the vacuum via chakra transmission. You've turned this little mud ball into a decent snack. I suppose I should thank you for doing the harvesting for me. Naruto didn't stop his work. He kept his eyes on the iron sphere, which was now glowing with a blinding, violet light. You're late, Momoshiki. I already ate your scout. And the goddess, she's part of the plumbing now. Momoshiki's eyes narrowed, the Rinnegan in his palms pulsing. Arrogance is a disease of the short-lived. You've tasted a drop of divinity and think you're the ocean. I'll peel that power from your skin and use your bones as toothpicks. Momoshiki lunged. He didn't use a jutsu, he simply warped space, appearing behind Naruto with a blade of red chakra. Naruto didn't turn. He didn't have to. The Truth Seeker orbs, now numbering in the hundreds, swarmed like a defensive cloud. They didn't just block the blade, they absorbed the kinetic energy and fired it back as a localized gravitational collapse. Momoshiki was caught in a gravity well that tried to crush him into a singularity. He grunted, his power flaring as he forced his way out. Kinshiki, consume. His massive guardian, Kinshiki, disintegrated into a red pill of pure energy. Momoshiki swallowed it whole. The transformation was instantaneous. Momoshiki's power tripled. His skin turned dark, his horns grew into a crown of jagged obsidian. And his chakra became a physical weight that caused the stars to dim. He raised a hand, creating a Takiguryu, a dragon of black flame and lightning the size of a continent. Die, lower life form. The dragon roared, its maw opening to swallow the earth. Naruto finally let go of the iron sphere. It didn't fall, it locked into place as the first node of the Heaven's Gate. He turned to face the dragon, his eyes shifting through every color of the tailed beasts before settling on a terrifying, absolute white. Lower life form, Naruto whispered. He didn't use a Rasengan. He didn't use a seal. He simply reached out and caught the dragon's snout with his bare hand. The black flames licked at his arm, but they didn't burn. They were sucked into his pores, fueled by T. Yin-yang release that allowed him to negate all elemental reality. I'm the guy who's gonna show you what happens when the farm starts biting back, Naruto roared. He punched the dragon. The impact didn't just dissipate the jutsu. It sent a shockwave back through the chakra connection to Momoshiki. The Otsutsuki god was sent flying through his own ship, the massive bone vessel snapping like a dry twig. Naruto didn't let up. He was a streak of golden white lightning, tearing through the vacuum. He appeared in the wreckage of the ship, catching Momoshiki by the face. You talk about harvesting, like it's a chore. Naruto growled, his voice vibrating with the collective rage of a planet. But you forgot the first rule of the hunt. Never corner something that has nothing left to lose. He used the human path and the Preta path simultaneously. He didn't just drain Momoshiki's chakra, he began to overwrite his soul. The Otsutsuki's memories, his techniques, his very identity were being pulled into the vortex of Naruto's consciousness. No, this is impossible, Momoshiki shrieked, his form beginning to dissolve into white ash. Nothing's impossible when you've got 9 gods in your gut and a world on your back. Naruto replied. With a final, violent pull, Naruto consumed the Otsutsuki king. The explosion of energy was so bright it was visible from the ground as a second sun in the middle of the night. Naruto stood in the silence of the void, surrounded by the debris of the alien fleet. He felt the new power settle in his marrow, the ability to freeze time, the mastery of the celestial dimensions. He was no longer just the vessel. He was the gatekeeper. He looked down at the earth. He could feel Hinata's pride, Konan's relief, and the silent awe of billions. The first wave is gone, Naruto announced to his people, his voice carrying through every radio, every speaker, and every mind on the planet. But there are more. The universe is a big place, and it's full of hungry things. He looked back at the stars, his eyes cold and resolved. Let them come, Naruto whispered to the dark. I'm the only thing they'll ever find. He returned to his work on the Heaven's Gate, the silver smoke of his hair trailing behind him. The empire wasn't just a nation anymore. It was a fortress, and its king was a god who had forgotten how to blink. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. The Empress of Shadows. The Heaven's Gate hummed with a low, cosmic frequency, a ring of obsidian and gold that now encircled the planet like the halo of a vengeful saint. Naruto stood at its center, his consciousness partitioned into 1,000 threads, each one monitoring a different sector of the galaxy. He had become the ultimate sentry, but even a god has blind spots when the threat comes from within the heart. Below, In the sprawling capital of Neo-Konoha, the atmosphere was thick with a strange, forced peace. The people moved like clockwork, their lives dictated by the rhythm of Naruto's chakra. But in the shadows of the great library, a different kind of power was brewing. Konan stood before a mirror made of liquid mercury, her fingers tracing the edges of a seal she had found in the archives of the sage. She had been Naruto's shadow, his advisor, his silent partner in the conquest of the world. But as she watched him transcend humanity, she felt a distance growing, a coldness and not even the fire of the tailed beasts could warm. He's drifting too far, isn't he? A voice whispered from the corner of the room. Konan didn't turn. He is protecting us, Hinata. He is the only thing standing between this world and the void. Hinata stepped into the light, her Tenseigen glowing with a pale, ghostly blue. Her devotion hadn't wavered, but it had evolved into something sharper, something more possessive. Protection is a cage, Konan. He's become the sky, but he's forgotten the earth. He needs a reason to come down. He needs to remember that even a king has a queen who can draw blood. What are you suggesting? Konan asked, her hand moving toward a pouch of paper bombs. The Otsutsuki core he absorbed. It's not pure, Hinata said, her voice dropping to a chillingly calm register. Momoshiki's will is a virus. It's eating at his edges. If we don't ground him, he won't be Naruto anymore. He'll just be a vessel for the next harvest. High above, Naruto felt the shift. It was a pinprick of rebellion. A flicker of dissent in the sea of his consensus. He descended like a falling star, hitting the plaza of the library with a force that sent a tremor through the tectonic plates. He walked into the chamber, his presence causing the mercury mirror to shatter into 1,000 droplets. His eyes were no longer white, they were a shifting, iridescent violet that seemed to swallow the light. You're whispering in the dark, Naruto said, his voice a subsonic rumble that made the paper on the shelves vibrate. I can hear your heartbeats, Hinata. I can feel the hesitation in your chakra, Konan. You're doubting the design. We're not doubting the design, Naruto-kun, Hinata said, stepping toward him, her palms open but her stance ready. We're doubting the designer. You've stopped eating. You've stopped sleeping. You've become a statue that dreams of stars. I have to be the statue so you can be the people. Naruto roared, the truth seeker orbs flaring behind him. Do you know what's out there? I can see them, tens of thousands of Otsutsuki, moving through the deep space like a swarm of locusts. They don't have names. They only have hunger. If I blink, if I take a second to be human, they will erase everything I've built. Then let us help you carry the weight. Konan shouted, her paper wings erupting from her back, each sheet inscribed with a seal that glowed with a dark, necrotic energy. You don't have to be the only god, Naruto. Share the burden. Let us take the core. Naruto laughed, a jagged, hollow sound. Share it, you'd be incinerated in seconds. This isn't just power. It's the friction of the universe rubbing against a human soul. You want a piece of this. You want to feel what it's like to hear the screams of a billion dead suns. He raised his hand, and the room was plunged into a localized gravitational well. The shelves collapsed, the floor buckled, and for a moment, the two women were pinned by the sheer pressure of his will. But Hinata didn't break. She tapped into the Tenseigen's ultimate form, the golden wheel reincarnation explosion. A blade of pure, golden light erupted from her hand, cutting through Naruto's gravity field like a hot knife through wax. I'm not a civilian you can suppress, Naruto-kun, Hinata hissed, her hair floating in the sudden vacuum. I am your queen, and if I have to break your heart to save your soul, I will. Konan lunged from the other side, her paper turning into a swirling vortex of blades that were infused with the Six Tails acid. They weren't trying to kill him, they were trying to pierce the armor of his divinity. To find the boy who used to smile at the sun. Naruto moved with a speed that defied the laws of physics. He caught Hinata's golden blade with his bare hand, the light sizzling against his skin but failing to cut. He swatted Konan's paper swarm away with a flick of his wrist, the acid evaporating before it could touch his coat. You're playing with fire, Naruto growled, his eyes flashing a predatory crimson. We're the ones who kept you warm when the world was cold. Hinata countered, driving her palm into his chest. The impact wasn't a physical blow, it was a spiritual one. She used the gentle step-twin lion fists to inject a pulse of pure, unrefined Tenseigen energy directly into the seal on his navel. Naruto gasped, his knees buckling for the first time in years. The nine-tailed beasts inside him let out a collective howl of confusion as the sudden influx of lunar energy disrupted their harmony. The Momoshiki infection, the dark, oily residue F the Otsutsuki king, surged to the surface, trying to fight off the intrusion. Now, Konan, Hinata screamed. Konan didn't use paper. She used the forbidden technique of the rain, the great paper ocean. 600 billion paper bombs didn't explode, they dissolved into a liquid ink that flowed into the cracks of the floor, forming a massive, planetary-scale sealing circle around the library. The imperial seal of the three queens, Konan whispered, her hands forming a sign that drew the blood from her fingertips. Naruto looked up, his face a mask of agony and rage. He could feel the connection to the heaven's gate flickering. He could feel the consensus of the world slipping through his fingers. "You're leaving us vulnerable." Naruto choked out, his skin turning a mottled gray as the two energies clashed inside him. "No," Hinata said, kneeling beside him and pulling his head into her lap. She ignored the sparks of chakra that burned her skin. "We're making you whole. You can't let a world you've forgotten how to touch." The library began to glow with a blinding, white-violet light. The sealing circle tightened, pulling the excess Otsutsuki corruption out of Naruto's marrow. And venting it into the atmosphere as a harmless aurora borealis. As the light faded, Naruto lay slumped in Hinata's arms. His horns had receded, and his eyes had returned to a deep, weary blue. He looked up at the two women, the goddesses of his own making, and for the first time in a decade, he let out a breath that wasn't a command. "You guys are a real pain in the ass," Naruto muttered, his old slang returning with a raspy human warmth. "We learn from the best," Konan said, leaning against a ruined pillar, her wings tattered and her chakra nearly spent. Naruto closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world returning to him, not as a burden of power, but as a responsibility of love. The stars were still there, and the hunger was still coming, but as he felt Hinata's hand in his, he knew he wasn't standing guard alone. "All right," Naruto said, his voice steadying. "The vacation's over. Let's go fix the sky before the neighbors show up." End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Dying of the Light. The aurora that had washed over Neo Konoha was a beautiful lie. While the people looked up in awe at the shimmering curtains of violet and green, Naruto felt the cold reality of the void. The imperial seal of the three queens had purged the rod of Momoshiki, but it had also cracked the shield. The heaven's gate was offline, its obsidian nodes drifting in orbit like dead satellites. Naruto sat on the edge of his throne, his head in his hands. The raw, unfiltered sensory input of the world was gone. No more hive mind consensus. No more hearing the heartbeats of every soul in the land of fire. He was just a man again, a man with the power of 9 gods in his gut, but a man nonetheless. "They're coming, aren't they?" Konan asked. She was pale, her chakra reserves flickering like a candle in a gale. She stood by the window of the spire, watching the stars. "They're not just coming, Konan," Naruto said, standing up. His joints popped, a human sound that felt foreign in the silent hall. "They're here. The pulse Hinata used to save me, it was a flare." Every Otsutsuki within 3 galaxies just saw the "no vacancy" sign turn off. Outside, the sky began to bleed. It wasn't a sunset. The fabric of reality was being unzipped. 10 massive rifts opened simultaneously above the village, each one discharging a bone-white spire that slammed into the earth with the force of 1,000 mountain-leveling bombs. The ground didn't just shake, it liquefied. "Hinata!" Naruto roared. The Hyuga queen appeared in a flash of starlight, her Tensagen burning with a desperate, white-hot intensity. "The perimeter is gone, Naruto-kun." The samurai at the gates were erased before they could draw their steel. "It's not a scout this time. It's the Legion." From the spires stepped hundreds of figures. They didn't look like Momoshiki or Kagaya. They were leaner, more industrial, the rank-and-file executioners of the Otsutsuki clan. They moved in perfect, terrifying unison, their eyes cold and hungry. "Seiken, Son Goku," Naruto shouted internally. "We're with you, kid," the beasts roared in a singular chorus. "Let's remind these parasites why this rock is defended." Naruto didn't fly, he lunged. He hit the first wave of Otsutsuki like a tidal wave of golden fire. He wasn't using the refined, detached power of a god anymore, he was fighting like the fox. He was ripping, tearing, and burning. He caught an Otsutsuki soldier by the throat and slammed him into the dirt, the boil release from Kokuo turning the alien's blood into steam instantly. But for every 10 he killed, 50 more stepped out of the rifts. "They're endless," Sakura screamed from the streets below, where she and the remnants of the Leaf were fighting a losing battle against the alien vanguard. Her medical seal was flared to its limit, her fists shattering white bone armor with every strike, but the sheer numbers were overwhelming. Naruto looked up. In the center of the rifts, a much larger presence began to manifest. It was a throne made of fused stars, and sitting upon it was the patriarch, Ashiki Otsutsuki. "You've done a commendable job, Uzumaki Naruto," Ashiki's voice boomed, chilling the air to absolute zero. "You took a primitive species and gave them a taste of the divine. But the play is over. The stage is needed for the next act." Ashiki raised a finger. A series of massive, black cubes began to fall from the sky. Each one was the size of a city block, heavy enough to distort gravity. "Hinata, get the civilians to the bunkers," Naruto commanded, his voice cracking with the strain of holding back the first cube with a Cho Shinra Tensei. "I'm stayin' right here," she yelled back, her palms glowing with the silver wheel reincarnation power. She struck the second cube, her strike echoing like a hammer on an anvil. But the mass of the object was too great. She was driven into the cobblestones, the earth cracking beneath her feet. Naruto felt a surge of cold, dark panic. He was losing. For all his god-tier scaling, for all the beasts in his soul, he was still just 1 point of light against an approaching eclipse. "Kurama," Naruto whispered, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "The seal. The real one. The one we talked about in the dark when I was 12. "Naruto, no," the fox growled, his voice trembling. "That's not a victory. That's just a suicide that takes the universe with it. Look around, Kurama," Naruto screamed, ducking under a beam of annihilation from an Otsutsuki captain. "There is no after this. If I don't do it, they take everything. They take the girls, they take the world. They take the soul of every kid who ever looked at the moon and felt safe." Ashiki descended from his throne, his Daikokuden eye spinning. He looked at Naruto with the pity a human gives an ant. "You struggle because you think your life has value. It doesn't. You are just a battery that's lived too long." Ashiki lunged, his speed surpassing the concepts of time. He drove a black rod through Naruto's shoulder, the chakra-suppressing metal burning like ice. Naruto didn't scream. He caught Ashiki's arm. "You're right about one thing, you pale bastard," Naruto growled, blood leaking from his mouth. His eyes turning a hollow, terrifying black. "The play is over, but I'm the one who's gonna drop the curtain." He reached into the very center of his seal, not the 9 compartments, but the 10th. The void where the Jubi's original spark lived. Baryon mode. 0. The world didn't explode, it went silent. The golden chakra was gone. The white Otsutsuki light was gone. Naruto was enveloped in a cloak of shifting, pitch-black shadows that seemed to drink the light from the sun. His hair didn't stand up, it flowed like ink in water. His eyes were void black with a single, pinprick of white light in the center. The air around him didn't vibrate, it ceased to exist. "What is this?" Ashiki whispered, trying to pull his arm away. He couldn't move, his very life force as being sucked into the vacuum of Naruto's new form. "This is the end of the line," Naruto said, his voice sounding like a mountain range grinding together. He didn't punch Ashiki, he touched him. He patriarch of the Otsutsuki didn't fly back. He began to disintegrate. Every cell in his body was being consumed to fuel the furnace of Naruto's final transformation. Ashiki screamed, a sound that tore through the dimensions. But Naruto didn't let go. "Naruto-kun, stop," Hinata cried out, reaching toward him. "Stay back," Naruto roared, the shockwave of his voice leveling every building in a 5-mile radius. I can't hold the edges. If you touch me, you're gone." He looked up at the sky, at the hundreds of Otsutsuki soldiers who were now frozen in fear. "You wanted the harvest," Naruto asked the universe. "Here's the crop." He unleashed the void Rasengan. It wasn't a sphere of energy, it was a localized hole in reality. It expanded with the speed of a nightmare, swallowing the rifts, the spires, and the legion. There was no fire, no noise. Just the sound of a vacuum being filled. When the light, or the lack of it, faded, the sky was empty. The Otsutsuki were gone. The rifts were closed. Naruto stood in the center of the wasteland that used to be his capital. The black cloak was flickering, the shadows thinning. He was translucent, his body slowly dissolving into the air. He turned to look at Hinata and Konan, who were running toward him through the ash. "Hey," Naruto said, his voice barely a whisper, his old, goofy smile flickering for just a second on his pale face. "I told you, I'd fix the sky, Naruto." "No," Hinata reached for him, her hands passing through his chest as if he were made of smoke. Don't cry, Naruto said, his eyes softening. I'm just going to check the other side. Make sure they don't come back. You guys, you gotta run the show now. Rule with some heart, okay. He looked at the two women he loved, the queens who had saved his soul when he almost lost it to the stars. I'm finally, just Naruto, he whispered. With a soft sigh, the hero of the leaf, the emperor of the vessel, and the god of the 9 beasts vanished into the wind. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing the world had ever known. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Throne of the Void. The silence in the wake of Naruto's disappearance didn't just feel like the end of a war. It felt like the end of physics. The world stood still, the ash of the Otsutsuki Legion settling over the ruins of Neo Konoha like gray snow. Hinata remained on her knees, her fingers clutching the empty air where Naruto's chest had been, her Tensagen weeping tears of pure, liquid starlight. But Naruto Uzumaki wasn't dead. He was elsewhere. He drifted in a space between Spock's, a realm of white static and golden threads known as the root of the world tree. He had no body, only a consciousness bound together by the sheer stubbornness of the 9-tailed beasts. They were who DD led around his spark like campers around a dying fire in a blizzard. You really did it, you crazy brat, Kurama's voice echoed, sounding small for the first time in history. You didn't just burn your life force. You burned the concept of you. We're fading, Naruto. The bargain's up. I ain't done yet, Naruto's thoughts rasped back. I can feel them. They're still out there. The source. Far below the spiritual plane. The world was already moving on. Hinata stood up, her grief hardening into a cold, diamond-sharp resolve. She looked at Conan, whose paper wings were gray and tattered. They didn't need to speak. The Empire was still there, even if the Emperor was a ghost. He's not gone, Hinata said, her voice carrying a frequency that shattered the nearby rubble. He's just the foundation now, and we're going to build a temple on top of him. But the universe wasn't finished with the Uzumaki. From the depths of the root, a figure emerged. It wasn't an Otsutsuki, it was a man with long, spiky hair and eyes that held the ripples of the beginning of time. Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the sage of 6 paths, looked at the flickering spark of Naruto. You have exceeded the script, Naruto, the sage said, his voice a drone that sounded like the humming of the earth. You weren't meant to win that fight. You were meant to be the sacrifice that restarted the cycle. But you chose to end the cycle entirely. Cycles are for wheels, old man, Naruto's ghost voice growled. I'm a man. I don't go in circles. I go forward. The price of going forward into the void is that you can never return to the light, Hagoromo warned. If I mend your soul, you will not be a human, nor a god. You will be the living singularity. You will be the bridge between what is and what can never be. You will rule, but you will never touch. I've already touched enough for 10 lifetimes, Naruto replied. Fix me. I got a promise to keep. The sage raised his staff. The golden threads of the root began to weave into Naruto's spark. The 9-tailed beasts screamed as they were compressed, their individual identities merging into a singular, primordial entity. The fox, the bull, the cat, they were gone. In their place was the 0 tails. The void beast. Back in the physical world, the sky above Neo Konoha didn't open. It shattered. A pillar of absolute black light slammed into the center of the ruins. The pressure was so immense that the survivors, Sakura, Kakashi, the samurai, were pinned to the ground. Only Hinata and Conan stood their ground, their eyes wide as the pillar dissipated. Naruto stood there. He didn't have horns anymore. He didn't have the golden cloak. He was wearing a simple, jet-black kimono that seemed to absorb all light around him. His skin was tan again, but his eyes, they were a deep, infinite blue that held the swirling galaxies of the void. He looked at Hinata. He walked toward her, each step causing the broken earth to mend and the flowers to bloom in a trail of impossible life. Naruto-kun, she whispered, reaching out. This time, her hand didn't pass through him. It hit the solid, warm muscle of his chest. But the moment she touched him, she didn't just feel his heart. She saw the beginning of the universe. She saw the birth of the stars and the death of time. She saw the true face of fate. I'm back, Naruto said, his voice back to its natural, gritty American edge. But the world's gotta change. No more empires. No more kings. We're going to turn this planet into a fortress that even the gods are afraid to look at. And us? Conan asked, stepping forward. What are we in this new world? Quote, Naruto looked at his two queens. He reached out, taking both of their hands. You're the reason I bothered to come back from the dark, he said. The world doesn't need a god king. It needs a family that knows how to fight. He looked up at the sky. The stars were still there, and far off, the remaining Otsutsuki were regrouping, their fear turned into a frantic, desperate rage. Naruto smiled. Not the smile of a hero, but the smile of a predator that had finally found its favorite prey. Conan, get the ships ready. Hinata, wake up the clans, Naruto commanded, his eyes glowing with a dark, regal power. We're done defending. We're going to their home. We're going to find the source of the Otsutsuki, and we're going to show them that in this corner of the universe, the fox doesn't just bite. We're going to rule the stars, Hinata said, a fierce, beautiful pride lighting up her face. Nah, Naruto said, pulling them both close. We're going to own them. The era of the shinobi was truly dead. The era of the vessel had evolved. The world wasn't just safe, it was dangerous. And Naruto Uzumaki was the most dangerous thing in it. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 15. The Eternal Crown. The homeworld of the Otsutsuki didn't have a sun. It was a jagged, crystalline dimension that existed in the throat of a dying nebula, lit only by the flickering glow of the god tree, a colossal, cosmic parasite that had drained the life from 1,000 systems. The ground was made of calcified bone and crushed stardust. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the edge of the great spire, his black kimono snapping in a wind that shouldn't have existed. He wasn't alone. Flanking him was a legion that would have made the Sage of Six Paths weep. Thousands of ironclad warships, powered by the Zero Tails Void Chakra, hovered in the violet sky. To his left, Hinata stood as the high priestess of the Tenseigan, her white hair flowing like a solar flare, her eyes commanding the very gravity of the planet. To his right, Conan, the empress of the paper god, controlled a swarm of obsidian shards that blotted out the nebula's light. They're coming out to meet us, Hinata said, her voice a calm, lethal melody. The remaining elders, the ones who haven't felt the sting of a mortal blade in 10,000 years. Let him come, Naruto said, his slang heavy and dangerous, like a loaded gun. I didn't come all this way to negotiate. I came to close the ledger. From the god tree, 12 figures descended. They were the architects of the harvest, the original Otsutsuki who had SP. Entians treating the universe like an orchard. They looked down at Naruto with a mixture of disgust and genuine, shaking fear. You have defiled the sacred path, vessel, the lead elder hissed, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. You have taken the chakra that belongs to the cosmos and chained it to a human soul. You are an abomination. I'm the guy you should have killed when you had the chance, Naruto replied. He didn't wait for a signal. He stepped into the air. Zero paths. Universe collapse. Naruto didn't use a punch or a kick. He simply released the pressure of his presence. The ground for 10 miles shattered into fine white sand. The 12 elders were slammed into the earth by a gravitational force so intense it started to crack their bone armor. One elder, faster than the rest, lunged with a spear made of compressed stars. Naruto caught the tip of the spear between two fingers. He didn't break it, he rewrote it. The spear turned into a cluster of blue hydrangeas that withered and died in a second. Your divine power is just physics I've already mastered, Naruto growled. He drove his fist into the elder's chest. The impact didn't create a shockwave, it created a vacuum. The elder was pulled into Naruto's own internal dimension, his life force becoming a mere drop in the ocean of the Zero Tails. Hinata, Conan, burn the tree, Naruto roared. The two queens moved in perfect synchronization. Hinata unleashed the Tenseigan, Silver Star Decimation, a beam of lunar energy that sliced through the god tree's trunk. Conan followed with the paper god's funeral, Billy. Ons of explosive seals detonating inside the tree's spiritual veins. The god tree, the source of all Otsutsuki power, let out a scream that echoed across every dimension. It began to collapse, its gall, den sap leaking out like the blood of a dying titan. The elders panicked. Their immortality was tied to that tree. They scrambled, trying to weave seals, but Naruto was a blur of void light. He moved through them like a reaper through wheat. In 3 minutes, the gods of the universe were nothing but piles of gray ash. Naruto stood before the stump of the god tree as it disintegrated. He felt a massive rush of chakra, the collective energy of 1,000 dead worlds, trying to find a new host. It swirled around him, a golden cyclone of absolute power. Naruto-kun, Hinata landed beside him, her face lit by the dying glow of the tree. If you take it all, you'll never be able to go back. You'll be the center of the universe. You'll be the one who has to hold it all together, forever. Naruto looked at his hands. He looked at the fleet of humans he had led to the stars. He looked at Konan and Hinata, the two women who had walked through hell just to stand by his side. I'm the vessel, Hinata, Naruto said, his voice soft but resonant. This is what I was made for. Not for the leaf, not for the cage. I was made to be the one who stops the hunger. He opened his arms. The golden chakra of the universe rushed into him. His body didn't break, it expanded. His kimono turned into a robe of pure, shifting constellations. His hair became a river of white light. He sat down on the remains of the god tree, and a throne of obsidian and starlight formed beneath him. He was the eternal emperor, the master of fate, the fox who had eaten the stars. It's quiet now, Naruto whispered, his verses. OICE carrying to every corner of existence. He looked at Hinata and Konan. He reached out, his hands glowing with a warmth that felt like home. He didn't just pull them close, he merged their spirits with his own. They wouldn't be his servants, or even just his queens. They would be the trinity that ruled the peace. What now, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked, leaning her head against his shoulder as they sat on the throne of the universe. Naruto looked out at the vast, infinite dark. For the first time, it didn't look empty. It looked like a garden that just needed a little bit of work. Now, Naruto smiled, a flash of the old, mischievous fox boy showing through the eyes of the God King. Now we go home and have some ramen. I'm starvin'. The ships of the Uzumaki Empire turned back toward Earth, leaving behind a dead homeworld and a new legend. The war was over. The cycle was broken, and atop the throne of the void, the king and his queens watched over the light, ensuring that the shadows would never grow too long again. The will of fire was gone. In its place, the will of the void burned eternal. End of chapter 15. The golden throne of the Otsutsuki homeworld crumbled into stardust, no longer needed by a man who carried the weight of the heavens in his chest. Naruto stood up, the cosmic robes of the eternal emperor fading back into his rugged, charcoal-lined gear. He looked at Hinata and Konan, the two pillars of his existence, and felt the final resonance of the nine beasts settle into a peaceful hum. The gods are gone, Naruto said, his voice echoing across the dimensions, no longer a roar of war but a promise of sanctuary. The harvest is over. From now on, the stars don't belong to the hungry, they belong to the brave. With a single thought, he tore a rift through the fabric of space-time. A golden gateway leading back to the blue marble of Earth. The fleet followed, thousands of ships trailing behind their king like a river of light returning to the sea. Back on the soil of the land of fire, in the heart of a rebuilt and flourishing Neo-Konoha, the trio stood atop the new Hokage rock. Below them, a world without borders began to breathe. There were no hidden agendas, no secret wars, only the quiet, steady pulse of a civilization protected by a power they could barely comprehend. Naruto leaned against the railing, the wind ruffling his hair. He wasn't looking at the horizon or the stars. He was looking at the people, the kids playing in the streets, the shops reopening, the life he had fought to preserve. We did it, Konan whispered, her hand resting on his shoulder. We just started, Naruto replied with a smirk, pulling them both into the warmth of his presence. But for tonight, the world can take care of itself. He turned away from the vastness of his empire and walked toward the flickering lights of the village, finally content. The fox was home, the queens were at his side, and fate was finally, truly, his own. End of story.